All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for a live call to talk about NVIDIA's earnings call that came out this afternoon, second quarter for fiscal year 2025. We appreciate it. I'm Nick Stenger. We got Sam Hardy over here. We got producer Owen back in the saddle, producing the show as always. And we are Stenger Family Office. You'll remember for the past 43 long years, it's been our mission to deliver both clarity and confidence to help secure your financial future. As always, nothing we're about to discuss is investment advice, so don't take it that way. You should go seek your own financial advice from somebody you trust or give us a call, 630-912-8431. Call Stenger Family Office if you're not getting good fiduciary financial advice. Many of you have been gracious enough to watch the shows every week on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify. If you don't mind, next time you're watching, subscribe to the show. It helps us out. Share it with your friends and family. We're trying to bring you the clarity and confidence. The good news, it's all about the data, math, statistics. That's what we're here to talk about today, Mr. Hardy. So we are back. Before we jump in, one word for you, Mr. Jensen Huang. Come on, man. Only 168% year over year growth. Really? I mean, you couldn't have done any better than that. Like, what's going on over there? Are you working?
Apparently not, but no, obviously they're doing a tremendous job. Another very strong quarter for NVIDIA, strong sequential growth. As you look at both year-over-year growth in revenue and earnings, it was $30 billion, which was well above the guidance of 28, the street expectations of 28.7 billion, and it was an increase of 122%. Now, to your point, the increase of 168%, very strong results for them. On the earnings per share was 67 cents, again 160%, 168%, excuse me, year over year growth, margins at 75%. So very strong quarter for them.
Yeah, overall, great quarter for NVIDIA here. Although the stock did react pretty negatively here after market, we're looking at down about 7%. Stock's trading at just under 117 a share, but you have to remember that's still up 160% just year to date. If you look at the 1 year return, we're up 168% year over year on NVIDIA. And then just backing up, and this is where I think a lot of people sometimes lose their perspective. They see a stock like this down 7% after market. They think the sky is falling. Let's not forget the fact that we're still up 2,897% the past 5 years on this stock. And so that is unbelievable. That is insane results. This company is smoking hot, taking a little bit of a breather here in the aftermarket, but nothing to be sad about. You should not be unhappy about these results. I think you said $31 billion, $30 billion in revenue this quarter.
Yeah, no, I think see a little bit of consolidation there. I know we were, talking and just trying to get other reactions to this, trying to see what other folks are saying. And I know in the past what we've seen is it's still a very volatile stock. It's obviously has a tremendous market cap, but on average, if you look at the past 8 quarters, what has happened is you've either seen a move, on average, either plus or minus 12% from what it's currently trading at. So a big move after earnings comes out isn't necessarily something that we haven't seen
Why
before.
why is that though? Why do you think we're seeing such big swings?
In my opinion, I think there's just a lot of hype around the stock. Obviously, there's a lot of people trading it, a lot of retail interest as well. So that could definitely be part of an attribution to why we may see that.
Yeah, and I think the other big factor you have to remember too is this company. A lot of people want to compare it to the tech boom, the tech bubble of the late '90s, and you could not be further from the late '90s, right? As far as the valuation's concerned, yes. Are we trading a little rich here? A little bit, absolutely. I think we're after today's earnings going to be right around the 32, 33 times earnings on a forward basis on the PE ratio. But you got to remember this company just posted $16.6 billion in profit for the quarter. This is not a Fugazi stock. This is not the pets.com that a lot of people think about and have the PTSD from in 1999 with the tech bubble. This is real earnings. And so, Sam, I think it'd be helpful. We were talking about this before the show started. What is the basis for NVIDIA's business model? And I think a lot of people don't understand. They hear artificial intelligence, they hear all the buzzwords, machine learning, cloud computing. microchips. They hear all this stuff. Give us a little background. What is NVIDIA really doing? Why is this such an important company?
Yeah, so if you take a look at them and why AI is now such a big play, obviously machine learning, and we talk about this all the time. Machine learning has been around for a long time. AI has been thrown around for a little while as well. And really, how we've seen it is, for example, machine learning. These machines have data that is basically given to them. It's kind of hard coded in there. It continues to learn and increase its efficiency, but it's a little bit more restricted than what we're seeing now on the generative AI side of things. And that's where
Which is
NVIDIA's
what is generative AI for everybody at home?
I think the simplest explanation I've heard of generative AI is you're basically data used to feed to the machine, the device before. Generative AI is it can go the opposite way. It can, a lot of data comes from the internet or other resources that are out there. It can actually go and get that data itself now, process it, make its own decisions. Again, we're talking about in milliseconds of time, and then be able to provide results for whoever the end user is there, the end machine. And I think we talked about it a little too. Where do you typically end up seeing this in daily life? We hear about generative AI and how amazing it is. And I think the most common place we see it, think about every website that you go to now, chat box pops up. Obviously, there's not an actual human on the other side of there. You can give it prompts. You can, and they're still working out some kinks. Obviously, nothing's perfect. Um, but I think that's kind of the most common area where you see it. You can actually give it a prompt. It'll go search. GPT is obviously an example of this. And really what was super hot when this whole kind of generative AI play kicked off. But, people are now using it in the medical field. Hey, these are my symptoms. It'll search. It can go through
Which it's helping surgeons and doctors diagnose problems faster than they would have without the technology, which is insane.
Exactly. Just overall, it increases efficiency, accuracy of things. Maps, for example, you don't necessarily see it working in the background, obviously, but the accuracy of where you're going, it can change routes. Everyone's been on Apple Maps or Google and gotten a recommendation to switch. It's playing behind the scenes there. So a big part of our life, and will continue to be so in the future.
So I think what's really important for everybody to understand about NVIDIA is also the fact that there's all these real companies, and not saying NVIDIA is not, right? But distinguishing between some of the companies that are trying to use AI versus make the AI product versus what NVIDIA is doing, which I would call NVIDIA almost like the highways, the pipes and wires of the economy, of this digital revolution that's happening. We're right now, I think we could call it the fourth industrial revolution that we're in. We've had obviously a manufacturing revolution in this country before. We've had all these other revolutions that have happened and changed the economy for the better. Now we're in this digital fourth industrial revolution. NVIDIA is truly the pipes and wires. It's the operating system that all these other companies have to operate off of. They have to go through NVIDIA if they want to produce this set of results for their customers. And we talked about this with autonomy. We were actually listening to the call today, the earnings call, and I think Jensen was on saying every autonomous car company, any car company making autonomous vehicles right now is literally using NVIDIA.
Yeah.
Every single one of them.
Yes, every single one. And to your point as well, Goldman put out a great piece on this, talking about the phases of AI. People maybe thought, I'm getting a little bit late into the platform, the chip makers of this, but they laid it out basically in four phases. So at the top of the pyramid, if you think about it in that way, is NVIDIA. To your point, the pipes, the wires, they're making the hardware, the platform that all of this is built out on. And then as you move into it, there's the infrastructure. You have applications, in cloud, computers, networks, data centers being built. I know there's been some REITs now that have been coming out that, are investing strictly in data centers to be able to house these massive supercomputers, basically, in the simplest kind of form there. You also have how do we actually make revenue off of this, increasing efficiencies, things like that. So, I think we're still early on. We've talked about NVIDIA kind of being that piece that has now been placed
The
in there.
missing piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, and Dan
Which
Ives.
explain the puzzle for everybody of all the different companies that have already reported. We have Taiwan Semiconductor, we've got Palantir, we've got ARM, we've got AMD, we've got Supermicro, which not such good news coming out of those guys today. We've got Intel, which had some pretty bad news as well, not competing because they're a competitor with NVIDIA. You've had ASML have some pretty good beats here. Qualcomm's doing very well, ServiceNow, but then the last piece of this equation, the AI equation or the puzzle, has been NVIDIA's earnings.
Exactly. Fitting into there, how do they fit in with all these companies? You mentioned some of those are those infrastructure companies that we've been seeing. Others are software companies, where now they finally have the actual infrastructure that can be placed in. And really, that's where you're going to see a lot of the growth moving forward as well, because people are going to have to get their data centers and all their equipment up to speed to be able to handle the power of having NVIDIA's products basically built into their system now. And again, the only person who's really on there's Advanced Micro, AMD, who is their closest competitor as far as having the platforms available that can be plugged in. And they've been doing fine. I think they had a really knockout year last year, if I remember correctly. But they've definitely slowed. I think they're only up around 5-6% this year. I didn't check at the end of the day. That was as of this morning. So definitely not putting up the numbers that NVIDIA is.
Yeah, and those guys in the pre-market are down 4%. You're talking about AMD, so
Yeah.
up 5.6% year to date, now down 4%. Just has not been the competitor to NVIDIA that a lot of people would have hoped for. NVIDIA has been the clear winner. You've got Dan Ives, and I know you're going to talk about this. His company Wedbush, he's been a tech analyst at Wedbush since for a while, but he's been a tech analyst for 20 plus years.
Yeah.
His company came out a little bit more conservative than he was, said $138 price target, used to be 120. So they raised their estimate on NVIDIA. Dan Ives said, and I think this was a CNBC interview, correct?
Yeah, this is last week or the week before.
He says 400. That may be a little frothy. I don't know your thoughts on that. I would say that's where we get into, okay, let's say it does get to 300-400 a share. I think that is getting into bubble territory for sure. But we're not seeing that. We're not seeing this runaway story and valuation. The stock is adjusted appropriately. We were at 130, 135 a share. We backed off of that in the pre-market. It looks like we're going to trade this thing around 117 tomorrow, which is pretty reasonable. Where do you say maybe some of these estimates are a little lofty? Do you put it at 400?
No, I mean, I think you have to look at what everybody's saying, right? So consensus, I think, on the street right now, if you look at what analysts from all the big banks and everything are saying, if you look at the report, it's like 40 to 50 analysts. You got all the big ones in there, JP, Goldman, obviously Wedbush was part of that, and another, a number of other names that you would know. The high estimate for the next 12 months was $200 a share. Low estimate was $100 a share. And then really the average of all of them is smack dab in the middle. It's like $149 a share. Tom Lee, who, is a fund strat and is also a little lofty in some of his expectations or his, his expectations moving forward. He came out, last month. I think he was right around 210 as a price target for NVIDIA. So Dan Ives has always been the highest. He's wonderful. He talks about NVIDIA, I think, basically every day. He's coined the term the godfather of AI. Jensen Huang. Anytime he says the name, it's the godfather of AI.
The little
Yeah, exactly. So shout out to Dan, but I mean he's in the weeds all the time. Maybe he knows more than we do. He's definitely made some good calls over the years, but I would have to agree. If you look at the general consensus on the street, it's a little bit lower than that, but could still see some really strong growth in the stock over the next year.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the analyst reports have been spot on. They're saying, look, this is a great company. Things are going very well, fundamentally making a ton of cash, producing a lot of growth. but now it's more so about expectations. The stock is trading off of expectations. So why did we have why do we have the stock down almost 7% now after hours and still had really good results? It's because the stock is now trading on future expectations, which you've got some of those numbers. I think we're expecting 32 billion for the third quarter. Is that correct?
Yeah, obviously haven't necessarily seen any analyst numbers yet for what the street expectations would be for their Q3 2025 for their fiscal year. But yeah, the CFO came out, said 32.5 billion was the guidance for next quarter, plus or minus 2%, maintaining similar margins as well.
Which, by the way, let's just point out the fact that if NVIDIA does $32 billion in earnings in the third quarter, that is still going to be probably pretty close to 100% growth, right? 120, 115% growth or something.
Yep.
Don't quote me on that number. We can look that up. But the street's saying, hey, that's only 6.7% growth quarter over quarter, which is still really good. I mean, we went from $5 billion in revenue on NVIDIA in 2015 to now 105 billion is the projection for the full year.
Mm-hmm.
You can't be too upset about that.
No, and I think, it goes to those sequential growth numbers. I think quarter over quarter, most of the numbers we have seen fall somewhere between the, 12 to 15% in growth. So still strong there. And you have to remember too, before the earnings call, I believe it was March or April of last year, the stock was trading at the same PE that it may open up at tomorrow. So again, talking about, is this a bubble? I don't think we're frothy yet to, steal your word there. But they have the earnings to back it up. We've had a full 18 months almost, and it's trading at the same PE. So
Well, and I think that's a huge piece of it, right? If you read Dan Ives, he says that future earnings on NVIDIA should be in that $5 a share zone after the split. If you take 125 and even tomorrow's price of 117, divide that by 5, you're at a forward PE of roughly 23 to 25 times, depending on what these other quarters come in at. Now, the big looming problem with NVIDIA's earnings the next couple quarters may be Blackwell. So we're on, what's the platform they're on right now? What was the name of it?
right now it's Hopper.
Hopper. So Hopper is the current platform. A lot of demand for that still, but there's building demand. There's a ton of pent up demand for Blackwell, which is the next phase in the platform. It's not just GPUs, it's this entire operating system essentially.
Yeah, it's a stack.
It's a stack, which I'm not a tech person, so not really sure what a stack is, but it's basically a comprehensive, hey, plug and play, take our entire, we've got multiple pieces of a platform that you can implement into your business. I thought it was really interesting just going back to some of the actual implementations of this. You've got automotive, you've got robotics, you've got professional visualization. One of the really neat things that Meta is doing is they're actually building systems. It's Meta platform, so the metaverse. Now, a lot of us are probably not going to go live in the metaverse. That's kind of goofy. I think a lot of that stuff was.
I'm still thinking about it.
Yes, I might go buy some real estate in the metaverse. We'll see. But do you think it's cheaper than real estate in the real world?
I have no idea. I've never looked at anything. I never will. I thought about buying a Bored Ape at one point, but then I decided this is ridiculous that
I
I'm
don't
going to
know what
buy
that
a.
is.
Those were the ones they were selling for like $2.5 million.
Is that an NFT?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we're past the NFTs. We're past the living in the metaverse, but there are real applications for this stuff. Like doctors, residents practicing surgeries can do this in the metaverse in a way that they could not do in real life, right? Visualizing home plans, visualizing prototypes without having to spend millions and millions in development or even billions in some cases. So there's some real applications. The one that always is interesting to me too is gaming. I'm not a big gamer myself. I know you played a few video games back in the day.
I've played a few. I still I got the two boys. They love playing Formula One. I got a wheel for them. So that's, when I get home today from work, we're probably going to go down as long as they behave themselves for my wife,
Does
and
that have
might
anything
do
to
some
do with
racing.
NVIDIA?
I mean, they might have some parts in there. I think, and maybe where you're going with this is obviously they fit into a few different buckets where the revenue comes from. If you break it down, they've always been in gaming and PC, and that's why they always they trucked along for a little bit. There wasn't anything massive happening in the company. Obviously, it was trading for a much lower value than it is now. But the data centers, and this might be where you were going to, is really what's been driving all of this massive growth. Corporations, their capex spending on purchasing NVIDIA's products, building out the infrastructure to further along their businesses. So
Well, I think you're exactly right, because the data center has really become their data center business has really become integral. They were even talking about sovereign countries, right? A lot of countries, their main export or their main value add, or whatever you want to call it, their a lot of their GDP would be tied to data, and that data can only be managed through NVIDIA's data centers, which is pretty incredible. You see Tesla doing this, right? We talk about this on Bullish from time to time, where what's the pricing strategy? Why is Elon going out and pricing FSD at next to nothing? Because he's trying to gather all this data. And I saw you actually posted a video on X the other day showing all the data centers that they built for processing the driver miles, the FSD driving miles. And these things look like the old school computer farms, right? You picture the very first computers in the 80s and 90s where they took up entire rooms. We're kind of going back to that now with
it
some
was
of these
that
data
IBM,
farms.
or like
Right.
yeah. And it cost a lot of money back then too. Now it's all in here. It's in one of these.
Right.
I have more processing power here now than they had back then. But that's an
Right.
aside.
No, and I think that's really the story is you've got companies that are literally like Amazon is not as much so how do you always think about how do they ship you dog food, a 100-pound bag of dog food or whatever for free? Well, it's not really about the dog food because that's obviously a very low margin business. It's about the data collection. They're taking all that data, love it or hate it, and they're sifting it through their system. And NVIDIA is the pipes and wires in a lot of cases of that system. You've got a lot of the other AI stocks here that have reported a couple of interesting stats. ARM Holdings up 79% year to date. Sam, you put all this data together, which is great. Palantir up 80%, data company. And I think that's, is that Peter Thiel, his company?
I believe so.
Okay. Great, by the way, great podcast. If you watch Joe Rogan's show, he did have Peter Thiel on. Really, really good episode. Taiwan Semiconductors up 65% for the year. Snowflake's down 40%. That's obviously a big data company. You got Intel down 58%. So the misses are pretty significant. It's almost like a winner take all scenario, like a lot of businesses. NVIDIA is the clear winner here. ASML, so European company, up 24%. Chip manufacturer. They make a very unique part of the chip, as I understand it. Qualcomm doing very well, up 22% for the year. And you've got ServiceNow, which is cloud computing, exists in a lot of Fortune 500s, up 18% for the year. So I think what you're seeing in the tech stack at Fortune 500s is they're saying, look, we've had record tight labor markets for years now, for at least since 2020. Maybe you could go back 2019, 2018 to an extent. We've got 7 million unfilled jobs. We've got to fill these jobs with somebody. We can't pay people what we're paying them forever and just keep raising prices into oblivion. Now you're getting into a wage price spiral, which is clearly indicative of an economy that's got some weakness underneath the surface. I don't think it's doom and gloom by any stretch of the imagination, but certainly a point where, look, we've printed 40% more dollars into the economy the past 4 years. People's wages are up maybe 20, 30%, but then their house costs 40% more. Their groceries cost 40% more. So I think a lot of companies are looking at AI and they're saying, hey, how do we actually reduce our labor costs with some of these technologies? And the reality is we're going to need some of that.
Yeah, and that's one of the phases as well. Obviously, on the software and IT service side of things, you'll see some great revenue being driven by AI there. But one of the final phases is, hey, let's implement this into the commercial, the professional side of things to really help drive productivity in these companies. I think something else, which we continue to see be a problem, is the cybersecurity space of things. And obviously, um CrowdStrike had their issue earlier this year.
which that stock's not doing well in after hours, as you can imagine.
No, probably not. But I think that's another area too where especially you brought up, Hopper moving over to the Blackwell platform. There's also better security built in there, and that's going to be a big factor in this as well because scams are getting far more advanced. You could record this show and probably be able to create us talking, saying whatever it is. So
And it would probably be way smarter.
Well, yeah, that and sound a little bit better too. But we'll just have to wait and see what happens there. So that's also an area where we could see some plays as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right on the cybersecurity application. This is clearly the biggest field that companies are worried about. And I think if you survey a lot of these CEOs, CIOs, chief information officers at Fortune 500s, that's got to be their top concern. I think when you read a lot of these surveys that come out, cybersecurity is one of their biggest issues that they're thinking about. The AI based cybersecurity product spending in 2021 was roughly $15 billion. And now it's projected to surge to about $135 billion a year by 2030, which we're not that far away from. There's some really interesting AI benefits with cybersecurity. One is detecting threats a little bit more accurately than humans do, creating fewer false positives. You've got a lot more better flagging of suspicious emails and messages where AI can kind of figure this out. We did have an employee who was really bad at passing the phishing emails at Stenger Family Office, the test emails, and was consistently in the online classes to get better at identifying phishing emails. So hopefully that can help a lot. Also, just watching for a lot of big data that can show these incidents ahead of time, and also if an incident happens, identify that problem almost immediately. So that's a lot of the really great effects of AI and cybersecurity. But you've got a lot of problems with it too. Have you seen these deep fakes they're coming out with now?
Yeah, well, I'm a big fan of Twitter, now X, and I say all the time, I see stuff on there and I'm like, all right, if this is actually something I'm gonna have a conversation on, I need to go do some actual research on because it is pretty unbelievable. Even like last year I remember a video of Tom Cruise that wasn't actually him saying a bunch of stuff. Even on the political side, you know, I won't get into that very much. There is some misinformation. I don't think it's necessarily coming from where people think it's coming from. We'll see. But it's something that you need to be cognizant of because people can make their lips move and speak a different language.
It's insane. Yeah.
It's pretty unbelievable. So it's just definitely some caution needs to be taken when seeing information these days, and maybe on the cybersecurity side, it helps with flagging that and so people aren't talking about things they shouldn't be.
So I think in closing, just to wrap up the NVIDIA Q2 call, look, not that bad. Actually, a really, really good quarter. Expectations going into this thing were really high. It was tough. I don't know what the right number of revenue would have been or the right earnings beat or what it would have taken to send the stock up 10% because people came into this thing so bullish and expecting very, very good things. Good things did happen, but I think we should probably are going to see a little bit of a buying opportunity here the next couple months. I think, and again, not stock advice, but I still think the fundamentals on this thing are very, very strong. I think you've got a great underlying business model, and it's going to be really fun to watch the next wave of this fourth industrial revolution take off. And I think there's just so much coming that we think is scary because we just don't know what it is yet. Just like we've always had in history, people have always been scared about the future, always been scared about technology. But when it's all said and done, it does make things better, makes our jobs easier. It makes life a little bit easier on a day-to-day basis. I mean, we literally couldn't function today without the internet. We couldn't function today without iPhones, arguably. By the way, if you get off the iPhone, you're now kicked out of your family because you have green text. So that's a big problem. There's just a lot of things that we never saw coming years ago, and now it's here. And really, things are I think operating pretty well for the most part. And I don't think we can overstate. This is one last point I wanted to make is I don't think we can overstate how important technology is and how much it goes hand in hand with freedom. And you look at these communist countries all over the place. We're certainly seeing this authoritarian push in the United States where we're moving towards bigger government. We're already massive government spending. We've got censorship going on. We just saw this guy in France, right? With, is it called Telegraph or Telegram or something like that? Um, Definitely cracking down on free speech. You're watching Elon Musk really push back against this crackdown, and you cannot dismiss the fact that every single authoritarian regime, to keep their power, the first thing they want to do is turn off the internet. The first thing they want to do is restrict people's access to technology. So what Jensen's doing at NVIDIA, what Elon's doing at X, and again, you don't have to love these guys. You don't have to think they're great. Even the management team at Apple, what they're doing for people, and how much really good comes out of technology, it cannot be understated. It's so important for freedom across the world, especially in the U.S.
Yeah, no, I would echo all of those thoughts. I think, it is interesting. Did you see Mark Zuckerberg talking about the censorship and things like that? So to your
He's
point,
even turned a
technology.
corner.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll see what comes out of that. I know that's recent news as well, but certainly NVIDIA is kind of leading the way here. It's the pipes and wires that's going to create this opportunity and be able to fulfill the need there, be the last piece of the puzzle. And so we'll continue to see how this plays out.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for watching. If you have joined us on the live show, if not, if you're watching on YouTube app or Spotify, please subscribe. And by the way, Investor Day 2025 is coming up right around the corner in a few short months. We are almost at max capacity. We got a few other RSVPs that came in today. I would bet by next week, maybe 2 weeks from now, we are going to be completely sold out. So if you are thinking about coming into town, November 7th and 8th, downtown Naperville, get it on the calendar. We've got Dr. Ed Yardeni, legend on Wall Street, and been absolutely spot on for years and years and years. We've got Andrew Opdyke from First Trust Portfolios coming into town. We've got that family office panel featuring a number of top people from our firm. You got to come to Investor Day, November 7th and 8th. Get it on the calendar. Get on the RSVP as soon as possible. Thank you for being with us. We'll see you next time very soon for the Nick Stenger Show, and we'll be back very soon with a special guest. Can't announce it yet, but a very special guest for the next episode of Bullish. Thanks so much for being with us.